my tutorials on Pandas introduction first. Okay, now data frame is a main object in Pandas framework. If you are using Pandas, you are almost always going to use data frame. Data frame is a data structure used to represent tabular data such as this Excel file. Here you can see that in any Excel file, what you have is rows and columns. So it is basically a tabular data. And if you want to represent this data into Pandas, then you are using a data frame object. Okay, now for this tutorial, I'm going to use Jupyter Notebook. You can use whatever IDE you prefer. You can use PyCharm, Notepad++, whatever you're comfortable with. I'm using Jupyter Notebook because it is great with data visualization. So the way you launch Jupyter Notebook is simply run Jupyter Notebook command on your command prompt. Now, I have a separate tutorial on how to install Anaconda. So if you follow that and install Anaconda, you will end up installing both Jupyter Notebook and Pandas. Okay, so I assume that you have followed that tutorial and install Anaconda. After that, you come to command prompt, run Jupyter Notebook, and it is going to launch your notebook. All right, now I'm going to create a new notebook by clicking on new Python command here. All right, now before we begin writing code, let's look at list of topics that we are going to cover today. All right, first thing we are going to do is import Pandas module in our notebook. So you'll say import Pandas as PD. Okay, and then you will create a data frame by saying df is equal to pd dot. Now the method I'm going to use is a read CSV. Okay, so I have this comma separated Excel file which contains weather data. So it has number of days, the temperature, wind speed, event, etc. Okay, so I'm going to import this data into my data frame. Okay, so read CSV takes a path of your CSV file as an input, and if you are having your CSV file at some other location than the notebook that you're running here, then you need to specify the full path. Okay, when you run this, the star that you were seeing here meant that it was running that. Okay, now it successfully created your data frame here. Now first thing we are going to do is just type in df and it will show you the content of that data frame. So you can see that this is pretty much looks like the Excel sheet that we had. Here you can see that in this data frame you have columns, and these are column headers, and you have rows here. You can also create your data frame by using a Python dictionary. So let me do that quickly. So here, if you have a dictionary like this, where each of these columns are your keys in the dictionary and the values are basically your rows or the column values. Okay, so then you can say df is equal to df pd dot data frame. Okay, so if you do that and run it, looks like it worked. And if you print the content of your data frame, you will see the same content. So you can see that you can either use read CSV or use this Python dictionary to create your data frame. Now data frame is all about rows and columns. It is a tabular data structure. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to print a shape. Now shape means the dimension. So 6 here represent number of rows. You can see it has 6 rows and 4 columns. Okay, so if you and this thing is a tuple. So if you want to store number of rows and columns, you can say rows columns equal to df dot shape, and when you print rows it says 6, and if you print columns it will say 4. Okay, so this is how you print rows and columns. Now we are going to use df.head. So when you say df.head, it's going to print basically initial few rows. Sometimes you might have a big Excel sheet and you might have like hundreds of rows, so you don't want to print all of those rows here, okay? Because if you do df, it's gonna print everything. df.head gives a convenience of printing only few rows, okay? Now if you want to, let's say, print only 2 rows, then you can say df.head2 and it will print only 2 rows, as you can see here, okay? You can also do df.tail and it will print last 5 rows. So you can see here, these are last 5 rows. Now if you want to print again, let's say last 1 row, you will pass that number as a parameter in your tail function. Now if you have ever used indexing and slicing with Python list, then you can use the same thing with Dataframe. So you can say something like, let's say I want to print row number 2 to 4, okay? Then what you can do is df2 colon 5. So it includes row number 2, but it doesn't include row number 5. That's why to print row number 2 to 4, I am saying 2 colon 5. And this is how you print it. Okay, if you want to print everything, then you can use either this or this, whichever way is convenient to you. Okay, now let's look into printing the column. So in order to print column, you can say df dot columns. So df dot columns will print the number of columns that you have. You can see you have 4 columns, okay? And to print the individual column, the content of the column, you can say df.day. So df.day will print the day column, okay? Similarly, df.event will print event column. So you can use this syntax, or you can specify that as if you are accessing a property in your dictionary. All right, so whichever way, this or this, they both are same. Okay, all right, now let's look at the type. So by the way, I'm using this B shortcut. So when you say when you press B, it's gonna insert a new cell after your current cell. You can also use this plus icon to insert a new cell, okay? And you can look at all the shortcuts here. So if you say insert cell below, the shortcut was B. So that's what I have been using, all right? Okay, now let's do the type. So the type of my df event column is series. So remember that the columns in your data frames are basically of type Pandas series. Okay, so this is just a reference information. Now we saw that when you type df, it prints the entire table or entire data frame. What if you want to print only few columns? In order to do that, you can do in bracket, one more bracket, and then only mention your columns that you want to print. So let's say I want to print event along with day. Okay, so if you do that, it will print event and day. So this way you can print however many columns that you like. Sometimes your data frame will have too many columns, and for doing your analysis you want to just restrict printing only few columns, and this is a great way of doing that. All right, so we covered how to deal with rows and columns, how to basically view your data. Okay, next thing we are going to cover is some operations with your data frame. So When you have weather data like this, the thing that comes to your mind first is what was the maximum temperature in the given data set. Okay, so if you want to do that, you will say df temperature. So remember, df temperature prints the entire temperature column, and if you want to find the maximum from all this number, all you do is just say max. Okay, so if you do max and you do control enter, by the way, control enter is a way to execute the cell. So you use control enter or click on this guy here. Excellent. So I just called max and it printed me the maximum temperature in my data set. You can also perform some other operations such as mean. So it's printing the minimum, not minimum, actually mean is average. Okay, for minimum you will say min. Okay, you can also print standard deviation. Okay, you can also say df.describe. Now what describe is gonna do is gonna print the statistics on your data set. So you can see we have temperature and wind speed column, and these two columns contains integer data. Okay, so it is gonna print the statistics on those columns. So you can see things like count, mean, standard deviation, mean, and then these are percentile. So 25 percentile, 50 percentile, and max. This function is pretty good in terms of quickly printing the statistics on your data. Now let's look at how can you conditionally select the data in your data frame. Okay, now if you are aware of SQL, then whenever you have your database, then you can run your SQL query to select the data, okay, based on the condition. So Dataframe also supports kind of like SQL, where you can type in your condition and conditionally select data. So for example, you can do something like, okay, give me all the rows in data frame where my temperature is greater than equal to 32. So when you do that, you can see that it's printing 3 rows because these 3 had temperature greater than equal to 32. Okay, what if you want to get a row where your temperature was maximum? So in that case, you will say, okay, give me df where my df dot temperature was maximum. So df dot temperature dot max. When you do that, you will see it's printing that particular row. Okay, so you can use this syntax or you can even do this. Okay, whichever way you prefer. Sometimes what happens is in your comma separated file, the column name might contain spaces like this, and if it contains spaces, then you will have to use this syntax. Okay, so you can run operations like these to conditionally select data in your data frame. Now let's say if you don't want to print the entire row, then you can only print specific column by saying, let's say I want to print only day. Okay, then it prints the day when your temperature was maximum. You can also print the temperature and a day. So I want to say, okay, give me a day when the temperature was maximum and print that along with whatever temperature. Okay, so when you do that, it says that maximum temperature was 35 in my data set and the day was 2nd January 2017. Now, as far as operations are concerned, I only covered few. I covered like min, max, standard deviation, and describe, but Pandas has whole bunch of operations. So if you do Pandas operations, then you will find a, let's say do pandas series operations, then you will find a documentation where you will see all kind of operations. So we looked at mean here. So mean, median, max, this is the entire list of operations that you can do. And you can see it's pretty intense here. The list is pretty long, and you can do almost all kind of statistics on pandas data frame and series. Next thing we are going to look into is set index. So when you have your data frame, which is like this, okay, you will see that it has this particular index. It is an integer index which it assigned it automatically. Okay, now when you run this function df.index, you will see my index right now is a range starting from 0 to 6. Actually it is 0 to 5, but this 6 is not included, that's why it says 6. Okay, now if you want to, let's say, change this index to be, let's say, something else, for example day, okay, then you can use df.set index and say day. Okay, when you do that, what happens is you notice the difference between this data frame here and this. Here your data the index was your integer index 0 to 5, and now the index is your actual date. The advantage of doing this is that you can now run loc function, and you can say, okay, give me a row on 1/4/2017, and when you do that, it's giving me some error. Okay, it gave me an error. Now let me investigate why it gave me the error. So let me print df, and when I print df, you can see that I still have integer index. So what went on? Well, the thing is, when you run set index command, it returns a new data frame. It doesn't modify the original one. Okay, so to modify the original one, you will have to say in place equal to true. Okay, and when you say in place equal to true, and when you print df, now you will see my df has my actual date as an index. Okay, now I can use date as an index. Okay, so 1/3/2017. So this will give me this particular row. Okay, now if you want to reset your index to be the original one, then you can call df.reset index function, and that function also requires you to pass in place equal to true, and after that when you print df, you can see that now df has my integer index back. Okay, so now what I can do is I can now set index to be event. One more time, in place is true. Okay, and when I print df, it's giving me error. Well, it gave me an error because I executed this statement twice. So let me do this. So let me reset my index. After my index is reset, let me run this again, and here I can see that now my event is an index. But you can see that index is not unique here. I have 2 rows with snow. So let's see what happens when you try to print rows using snow as an index. So when you do that, you will see that it will print both the rows. So it still works. Okay, so you can pretty much set any column as your index, and then you can use it as sort of like a hash function, where using that particular column as a hash key, you can get the values associated with it. Okay, so that's all I had for this tutorial. This is just a brief introduction of Dataframe. Dataframe has many features that I have not covered in this tutorial, but I'm going to cover them in my future tutorials. Our next tutorial is going to be different ways of creating Dataframe. In this tutorial, we saw how to create Dataframe using read CSV function and a dictionary, but then there are many other ways also of creating this data frame object. Okay, so that's what we are going to learn in our next tutorial. Until then, thank you for watching